be on YouTube, but we'll see what's up. You know what I'm saying? If it is on there, it's gonna be kind of grainy. All right. All right. So everybody, you know, and I don't think I shared this with you all before, but some of you may have the actual document that goes into it. Right. Some of y'all may have the document that goes into it. So I'll just kind of read off of it, and after we finish, we can go into some more information about it. All right. It's composed of a few different sections. The first section will be the waning, conjunction, and waxing of the new moon based on the scriptures. The next one will be based on the constellations, the Mazzaroth. All right. And the section after that we'll be dealing with the Book of Jubilee and the Book of Enoch and how they totally disrespect the Bible. And then the next section will be about the calendar of Judaism and Karaism, all right, which is the calendar that the other religions use. And that'll kind of start to wrap it up. So it's not something that's very long, okay? It's not a very long presentation, short lecture. It's an old lecture too. So we'll just kind of jump right into it, okay? So this is basically, and if you caught my broadcast today on Facebook, if you didn't, go back if you can, when you can, because basically, you know, we went into the Hallelujah scriptures, the Greek scriptures, and the Hebrew scriptures, as well as the Hebrew dictionary, showing you the words that are used pertaining to the new moon and the fact that it's covered. And so some of you may have this information, but again, when we look at certain scriptures like Exodus chapter 17, verse 16, when it says that the Most High swore, in the Hebrew, it actually says like by his hand upon his throne, or his hand upon case or kas. All right. So that's what it says, you know, which again, the word either means throne or it means secret. So whatever translation is used, it doesn't matter because the throne is covered and the secret is covered also. So these are the types of, you know, I'm not teaching like apologetics, you know. It will be more of a system of, you know, but you don't have to really be familiar with apologetics per se, meaning explaining the scriptures and, you know, giving a true meaning. It'll more be like a system of hermeneutics, where you can take information and methodically and systematically look at the scripture, the source, the data, and make a logical deduction and conclusion based on what you're reading, not based on what somebody taught you, what I say, or what great-great-grandma said, but based on just what it says. And then once you reach that conclusion, now you can jump to whatever doctrine is supported by that conclusion that you reached, okay? By that conclusion that you reached. So it's a system of where you can look at the Bible, see the words, see what they say, and, you know, you start to build your argument, you build your doctrine upon what it actually says. You don't build your doctrine upon, you know, this means this, and then go back. In other words, if you want to understand the Bible, if you want to understand the doctrines in the Bible, you can't start in Ezekiel. You can't start in Ezekiel. You got to start in Genesis. If you want to understand the basic parameters of marriage, you got to understand Genesis. You got to understand Genesis first. If you want to understand the arrival of a Messiah type figure that's going to be an atonement, or that is going to be related to the sin that Adam did, you got to start from Genesis. It's all in Genesis. So, you know, brothers kill me. They want to start to explain a doctrine, you know, during the time of the Babylonian captivity. Bro, we've been up and down. We've been good and bad. King, you can't start there. The bare minimum, if you don't start in the Torah, I would say the bare minimum is going to be with the writings, which are the thoughts, feelings, and emotions of our king that was after Yahweh's own heart, which is King David. So you should at least be able to explain your doctrine through what King David said. And if we can't see it through what King David said, we know that the concept of whatever we are believing, we know that the Most High said that by wisdom he founded and established the world and the heavens. So we should be able to reproduce or show that doctrine that we're saying based on the principles of wisdom. And because brothers don't do these three things, they don't show it in the writings of the King David, they don't show it in the writings of the wisdom book, and they don't show it in the Torah. People believe their conclusion about another scripture. All right. They believe what they're saying, about what another scripture says. And that's what's throwing everybody off in Israel. I mean, how the heck you going to come with a book of Enoch and you can't show what Moses said, what King David said? That's the king. Enoch wasn't the king over nothing. No disrespect to Enoch, but he wasn't nobody's king. He definitely wasn't instructed from what we see in the Bible to be after Yahweh's own heart and to write memoirs about his experiences to help us. So even if the book of Enoch was valid, which it isn't, it doesn't teach the doctrine that we need to understand these different things. Not only that, but everybody that we read about, in the prophets, they're writing about the Bible from a perspective of the Torah, of understanding the Torah. It's almost like what Paul said, what Peter said about Paul. How can you understand what Peter is saying about Paul, or what Paul is saying about the Bible, if you don't understand the basic education that they all had, which was the Torah? All right. So that's another element. And the last element that I want to point out is the fact that Psalms 81:3 or Psalms 81:4 in the Hebrew is so potent because it deals exactly in the context that we needed to deal with. It talks about an activity being done because it's a feast day, because it's a new moon, and because of the keseh or the kasa or the kasa'a or the kasa, because the moon is covered. So it gives you everything that you need, and it explains to you why. So it's almost like a direct commentary of Ezekiel chapter of Leviticus chapter 23, when we're told about the memorial of the blowing of trumpets, and it tells you why. It tells you why. Excuse me. Excuse me. It tells you why. All right. It tells you why this day is observed, why we're doing this, what this is in memory of. Okay. Hey, I need you to stop logging on, please. It tells you what is done in memory of. So now, without any further ado, here's the lecture. Okay. Now, and I'm reading off of a paper, so don't my eyes. I'm not gonna have full contact. Okay. The new moon is a phrase, and some of you know this, but some new information may be given to you also. The new moon is a phrase that's applied to three separate things. It's applied to the day, and it's very important. And I don't want to get long-winded about it, but I'm going to explain certain things, and I'll try to be as brief as possible. The new moon in the Bible is applied to the day in which the moon enters a new phase. The moon enters the phase of being new. It's a day, the day of the new moon, which that discounts the sighting of the crescent moon. Why? Because if the new moon is happening before the sighting of if the new moon is happening on a day, if you're saying you see the crescent moon before it's sunset or after it's sunset. If you're seeing this crescent and it's almost sunset, then you're not keeping that whole day holy. Everything before that was happening in that day. So you can't have a day of the new moon looking at the sky and saying, oh, we see the crescent now a few hours before sunset, and now we're going to start to observe the new moon when the sun goes down. That's the opposite of the first day of the new moon. That's the day of the new moon. But because people trying to teach you the Bible and they don't understand basic astronomy or basic biblical times, basic principles of time in the Bible from Genesis chapter 1, evening and morning was the first day. Everybody in Sunday school knows that. So if evening and morning is the first day, and I'm looking at the sky, seeing the crescent moon before the sun goes down, how can I say, oh, we sighted the new moon in Jerusalem at 7 p.m. and it's 11 a.m. in New York? You've already polluted that day, genius. You already started that Hebrew day. So how are you going to say, oh, the sun went down? It's 11 p.m. Let me go ahead and finish laying with my wife, finish working, finish shopping, finish buying. And now when the sun goes down, the day is over. Now I'm going to start to observe the new moon because somebody sighted it. Not only that, but we have a problem with all of Ezekiel's writings. Everybody that wrote outside of Israel, from Babylon to the time of Esther, they're writing in a time zone and they're writing east of Jerusalem when the sun is going to set first where they are, then in Jerusalem. So how is Ezekiel saying is this day of this month, this day and this month? How is Ezra saying I was in the spirit of the Lord on this day and this month? And how is John on the Isle of Patmos saying west of Jerusalem, you know, saying it was this day of the week? And how is everybody saying all these things outside Jerusalem if nobody's, how did they have telegraphs? Did somebody say, oh, well, it's the new moon in Babylon now. Go check with Jerusalem, see if they can see it. No. So the people that are teaching you these doctrines, I mean, no disrespect to nobody, but they're idiots. They are blundering idiots. How is Ezekiel telling me from Babylon it's the first day of the 6th month if he ain't in Jerusalem? If he's out, look on the map. Look at the time of sunrise and sunset in Babylon, in Shushan, in Iraq, in Iran, and see if it's the time of Jerusalem sunset. The answer is no. It's a totally different time zone. It don't get dark in Jerusalem at the same time it gets dark 3-4 hours east. That's like saying it gets dark in California and New York at the same time. Or that's like saying it gets dark in Chicago and in New York at the same time, or Alabama and Savannah, Georgia at the same time. No, it doesn't. I mean, and I'll be honest with you, it don't even get dark on the western part of Haiti and on the eastern part of Dominican Republic. Haiti is in the Eastern time zone. Dominican Republic is in the Atlantic time zone. It doesn't get dark at those places at the same time. Now, maybe close to the border, it may be around the same time frame, but not exactly. Definitely not. But I gave two extremes: East and West. Eastern Dominican Republic, Western Haiti. No, it's two different time zones. So we have a problem now because these people are using a flexible, changing definition of what the new moon is. There's no way that you could say the first day of the month means the first day in which the Hebrew day occurs. If you're saying that this is the day of the new moon, but it's about to be sunset, so we're going to wait to observe this first day. How is it the first day then? If it happens in a day and you wait until the sun goes down and then you start to observe it, that's the opposite. The day's over. You messed up. Go back to the drawing board. So here we see that they're messing up their definition because they don't understand time in the Bible. So I'm going to tell you all something. The brothers at HODC, they do not understand the Hebrew calendar. The brothers at GMS, they do not understand the Hebrew. I'm not talking about the new moon. I'm not talking about the lunar Sabbath. I'm not talking about the crescent moon. I'm talking about the Hebrew calendar, period. Any concept working integrated about time in the Bible. They cannot explain to you. They cannot explain to you what, okay, they cannot explain to you what did Christ mean when he says 12 hours of day and 12 hours of night. What did he mean when he said that? Because that's not true. Okay? That's not true. If you take it literally, it's a lie. There are not 12 periods of 60 minutes every day of the year anywhere in the world, ever, period. So if you're taking it literally for what Christ said, it's a lie. If you understand what he meant and how it was done in ancient Israel and how the Romans did it, and if you understand, those basic concepts, it's true. So they can't explain that to you. I guarantee you. Ask first of all, ask somebody from HODC, ask somebody from GMS. Show me in the Bible about start from Genesis and show me about time, and then look at the Hebrew letters and explain it to me from the Hebrew letters, and then show me examples of this throughout the Bible. All right. How are you going to teach somebody something that you don't understand? You're just mirroring and parroting. That's why they had to go into Jerusalem and learn it from Hoshua Amariel, who still doesn't understand it, which is the same man. I love the brother, so don't get me checking people for me not loving them. All right. The scripture says the Most High chastise those whom he loved. So I'm just putting everybody on notice that these doctrines are coming from people that are not doctrinally sound holistically. So because Hoshua Amariel had a lamb on a cross, crucifying it for the Passover in 2017, if I'm not mistaken. I remember that. So these are the people that House of David made a video with, that the crescent moon was the new moon, based on some stuff from the book of Enoch and based on a book that Hoshua Amariel said. And GMS, same thing. We're going to use the new moon is going to determine when the Sabbath starts. You can't show that you can't get into Genesis, the end of Genesis 1, before that whole doctrine is blown out the water. But because people don't have a fundamental application that they never leave from. I never leave from my basic doctrinal premises, which is one, the Bible and the doctrine you teach has to be based upon and demonstratable by polarity and contrast. And that polarity and contrast is explained and taught and demonstrated from Genesis 1:1. We see in beginning, Elohim, Elohim created. All right, heaven and earth. So in, not out, beginning, not in, Elohim, not man, not Hashatan, the heavens, not the earth, and the earth, not the heavens. We have those contrasting beliefs being given to us from Genesis. And then we see darkness, and then we see let there be light. And then we see the process of photosynthesis before the sun was created, letting you know that the elements necessary for life to germinate and reproduce on the earth before the sun were already present in the atmosphere under the condition that the Most High gave us, with the darkness and the light already being present before the sun was created. But you're listening to people that don't understand these concepts. So because they don't understand these concepts, they just make videos which are all inspiring and charismatic. I'm the least charismatic of probably any brother in Israel. I'm just gonna wow you with the truth. That's my charisma. My charisma is the truth. My charisma is the fact that you cannot have a first day of the new month being announced after the first day. That's like waiting for January 1st to say That's like waiting for January 1st to be on your calendar and then saying, okay, y'all, it's January 1st now, after January 1st ends at sunset. Okay? So now, that's the first thing. The new moon has to happen in a day. That whole day is holy. Okay, doesn't the scripture say, blow the trumpet on the first day of the 7th month? Is that what it say or no? Does it say that? Blow the trumpet on the first day of the month? Is that what it says? Doesn't the Bible also say blow the trumpet on the first day of your new moons in Numbers chapter 28? This says that. Everybody knows. Well, most of you should know it says that. Okay, so the question is, what is a day? The day is the time period between evenings and evenings. So if I see the crescent moon between the previous evening and between the upcoming evening, that's the Hebrew day. So when do I blow the trumpet? And if I blow it when I see it, that means I know it's the first day. And if I know it's the first day, that means all of the time frame before I see that crescent in the sky, I polluted it. I polluted it. Which means now, if I say, I seen the crescent moon, make the announcement. Okay, y'all, today is the first. No, see, already you're wrong. Because they're going to say, oh, after sunset, that's when it starts. No, it don't start at sunset. It starts on the day you know it's going to happen. How did David say, oh, in 3 days, we're going to have the new moon? So I got to go to King Saul, even though he don't like me. I got to go to his table to eat. But I really don't want to take that chance. Where's David at? Well, maybe they went to make a sacrifice. So you got a time problem. How is David saying when the new moon is going to be if he's waiting for somebody to see it? Was he a time traveler? Did David travel 3 days into the future and say, wait, Jonathan, wait, the Spirit of the Lord is coming upon me, Jonathan. They are going to sight the new moon in 3 days, which means I should not fail to eat at the king's table. Wait, how's the king's staff preparing a special meal for the new moon in 3 days if nobody sighted the new moon? How are they getting this special meal? Was they scrambling around in the dark? Or they have some food on standby just in case it came and was announced? No, that whole doctrine is a lie. And what kills me is that a lot of people, they want to discredit the Talmud, and rightfully so 9 times out of 10. But then they're doing everything that the Talmud says to do. You find the crescent moon announcing the new moon in the Talmud in the section about the Sanhedrin. You don't find it in the Bible. How did our sister Judith stop her fast on the evening before the new moon if she's waiting for somebody to announce that the new moon has been sighted? It's impossible. When you read in the Maccabees, how did Antiochus Epiphanes, the scriptures say he was so hurt and he was so regretful of what he did that he said, before your new moons, before your Sabbath, before your holy days, you all got 3 days vacation before and 3 days vacation after. So how did we program a 3-day vacation before the new moon? There you go to 3 days again. How did we program a 3-day vacation before the new moon if they're waiting for a visual sighting of the crescent in the sky? All right, now I'm gonna tell you the truth after I take a sip of this lemonade. And we're back. Okay, now you can just ask AI. You can ask Google, who observed the crescent moon for religious purposes? 2 things are going to come up: Babylon and the Jews. The Jews, they lying on us. Babylon, they telling the truth. The Babylonians observed the crescent moon as a day of worship. Okay, so now the new moon is actually, that terminology is actually applied to the time, okay, the minute, the hour, and the date that the new moon happens. When's the new moon? Well, it's going to be at 6:30 a.m. on the 19th or on the 29th, 6:30 a.m. Okay, 6:30 a.m. or 5:30 a.m. on the 29th. Okay, so we know that's going to happen. So that means that we have to make sure that from Friday night, we keep that whole day holy. This is what King David did. King David knew when it was going to happen. All right. Sister Judith knew when it was going to happen. The Israelites under the Maccabees, they knew when it was going to happen. So they could make the proper preparations. They were not dismayed at the signs of heaven because the heathen were dismayed at them. That's Jeremiah chapter 10. So they knew in advance when this occurrence was going to happen. They knew in advance, just like the Mayans knew, the Aztecs knew, the Cherokee knew, the Israelites knew, all right? The Dogon tribe knew, the North American Indians, the mound builders, the Hopewell culture, Cahokia, they knew. Everybody knew. So now you want to say, oh, they didn't know. We did know. So it wasn't that they didn't know when the new moon was going to happen. It's that the idolatry of worshiping under the crescent moon and waiting for the appearance of the crescent moon had infiltrated into Israelite society. And that's why people started to wait for the crescent moon. But it's the actual day, time, and hour that the new moon happens. The actual day, time, and hour that it happens is also called the new moon. All right. So when it enters into that phase, when the center of the sun and the center of the moon are as close as possible before the moon starts to move past that, what they call center of gravity, that actual moment is also called the new moon. So that's the second definition that we have. It doesn't seem like I'm giving a lecture. It seems like I'm using my lecture as an outline for a teaching session. So I apologize for that. All right. I'll try to do better when I finish this paragraph. It says, and now the new moon is a terminology that is also applied to the actual physical new moon when it enters into its new phase, the new moon. So there you have three definitions of the new moon that are always consistent. It's the time when, in other words, let's say 0 and 0 degrees. When the moon is close to 0 degrees, that's the new moon. All right. And now you got the exact you got the day that it happens. Like today is the new moon. And you have the exact time and minute that it happens. Why do you need to know what time and hour it happens? You see? Hey, ask HODC that. See what kind of answer you get. Ask GMS that. See what kind of answer you get. Ask True Nation that. See what kind of answer you get. And once you ask them, say, well, you know what? Would you be willing to have a public, respectful, moderated conversation with Parazah on this subject? You know, just brothers talking about the calendar. Just brothers talking about the calendar. And then say, for your time, you know, if you stay respectful and it's an hour and a half conversation, you know, the Parazah is willing to compensate you for, you know, $100 for an hour and a half of your time. So in case you got something else to do, that's $6 an hour. Not to pay because they're important people. Their time is valuable. And I respect that their time is valuable. So we'll pay them $66 an hour. No, I don't like how $66. We'll pay them $50 an hour. So that'd be $75 for an hour and a half. And then we can give them a $50 bonus. Matter of fact, we can say we'll pay them $50 for every 45 minutes. So hour and a half.
Why are you gonna pay?
Huh?
Why are you gonna pay them for being wrong?
I'm gonna pay them to be involved because you're gonna wonder why they saying no. Because they ain't gonna accept that deal. They're gonna say no because when it comes to debating somebody respectfully live, they are cowards. Matter of fact, you can go to the home of the truth with no cowards and ask them, and they're gonna say no. And you can go to the ones that said that they are the authority of the Bible, IUIC, and they will say no. Nobody wants to have a public discussion about this topic using only the Bible and Bible dictionaries.
That's right.
Nobody want to do that. And I'm not saying this to brag or boast. I'm saying this to show you that they know that they cannot defend their doctrine in the face of adversity. Hamashiach was in the markets. Paul was by the synagogues in the markets, debating with the people, reasoning with the people. They didn't say, hey, y'all, come listen to me talk, don't ask no questions, and then we leaving. All y'all that disagree, get them out the comment section. Get them out the audience. Only get my supporters in the audience. They like Donald Trump. Only bring my supporters to the rally. All right? Now, so that's three things. Now, the entire day in which the new, and again, I want to reiterate this. If anybody is teaching about a lunar doctrine, lunar-based Sabbath, and teaching about a crescent moon for the new moon, and teaching about a white moon for the new moon, they need to have a public conversation with somebody from Mashara Yasha'Allah or somebody that wants to do it, that has been taught properly, because they obviously have not been taught properly. And then explain why they got the authority to go against the teachings of Masha and to create new doctrine that no Israelite body was teaching. Who gave them that authority? Okay. So now the entire day in which the new moon enters into its new phase, that's called the new moon. As the event of the new moon occurs, in time and in space, this event is also called the new moon. And the new moon as an instrument in the heavens is called the new moon during the period in which it is in front of the sun. All right. So those are the three ways that we see the new moon being used. All right. Now, the scripture says that the perfection of the new moon begins a new phase. And the name of this phase scientifically is inferior conjunction. Inferior means small or less. That means a small distance between the moon, the earth, the moon, and the sun. All right. Thus, it means that there's a shorter distance. Okay. So the conjunction means that one is directly in front of the other. They're directly in front of each other. Okay. Before and after the conjunction, before and after, before and after the new moon, occurs in the sun, with the conjunction, okay, before after this happens, what do we have? The moon, before after this happens, okay, before after the conjunction happens, a small portion of the moon is visible, and it appears as a crescent shape. Now, this crescent shape appears in all sorts of ancient idolatry statues of gods and false goddesses. And it was a symbol of moon worship. Okay. However, during the event of the new moon, no portion of the moon is visible because it's directly in front of the sun. This is why we call a new moon black. So, how are you going to work? How are you going to draw a black circle over a black background? It's nothing to worship. It's nothing to worship. All right, so now all of our ancient ancestors, including the Limba and including the Iba, but the ancient peoples and the people that's not related to us, right? The Persians, the Assyrians, they're not our people for real, they not. The Aztecs, the Babylonians, the Israelites, the Lakota, the Maya, the Taino, all right? They all defined the new moon as an event that blocked the light from the sun, all of them, all right? Making the moon appear to be black. So the period of time when a crescent appears on the left side of the moon, all right, is called a waning crescent. It's getting smaller, waning. All right, so waning means that the light is decreasing. And as the light is decreasing, the decrease is perfect. It's a perfect decrease when there's no light that's visible from the moon. Okay, now after that, it keeps moving. And then what we're going to have is a period of time when now that the moon is going to start to move, and we're going to get a crescent on the right side. All right, and that's what we want to call the waxing crescent, getting brighter and brighter. All right. So waxing means that the light is, of course, increasing. All right. So this waxing reaches its high point at the full moon. All right, which is approximately in the middle of the lunar cycle. Okay, approximately, not always exactly, but approximately. So it's important to know that the period of time between the waning or the decrease and the waxing, which is the increase, that period of time between the waxing and the waning is called the new moon. It's distinct between the periods that come before and after. There's nothing distinct about the crescent on the left and right side. What's distinct is when the moon is in the middle of those two periods and it's black. Okay. So now, when we go into Sirach chapter 43, in verse 7, it says, "From the moon is a sign of feast, a light that decreaseth in her perfection." So by this verse, we're told that the light becomes least, all right, becomes less and less in the perfection of the moon. So when the moon is in her state of perfection, she doesn't have any light. The light is fully decreased according to this scripture. The scripture says that the light decreases in her perfection. And how much of a decrease can you have than zero? No light. So now, after the light has decreased, the moon is new. All right. So the moon is a sign of feast. Why? Because once it becomes perfect and new, that's when we begin to count the days of the month. Not after the crescent or after this black period, but the day of the black moon is day number 1. So this is going to be the new Chadash, which is or Chadash or Chodesh, which is the Hebrew word for month. So now when it leaves this position, it increases. And when it increases and it shows its light again, this is what we call the waxing or the increase in light. So now when we move to Sirach 43 and 8, it tells us the month is called after her name, increasing wonderfully in her changing, being an instrument of the armies above, shining in the firmament of heaven. So from this verse, we're given certain facts about the moon. One, we're called she. All right, now we see that the moon is feminine. And it tells us in her changing, which means what? The light now begins to increase. What you have here is a period of crescent moon, black moon, and crescent moon again, with the process being centered on the black moon. So in her changing, the light starts to increase. So this creates a crescent shape on the right side of the moon. It's increasing now. The light is increasing from 0. So if you meditate on this phrase, right? You just think for a minute. In her changing, you'll realize that in the change, the light increases. In her changing, you realize that in the change, the light increases. Because as the month is called after her name, it says increasing wonderfully in her change. So the change means the increase in the light. That means that there was a change, meaning that there was no light, and now there's light. It doesn't say there's a little bit of light or a lot of light. It says in her changing. It was no light, then there was light. And it starts to change, meaning the light gradually becomes, white on the right side of the moon. All right. So it doesn't differentiate from a small change or a big change. It just says in her changing, meaning that what? The light is getting greater and greater and greater. And then she increases enough to what? To fully illuminate, all right? To fully illuminate the sky. That's the full moon. The light is still increasing. Okay? So it tells us also that in this changing, she increases enough to shine in the sky. How do we know that? It says, because the verse literally is telling us, it says shining in the firmament of heaven, increasing and changing and shining. So that first little bit of shine is part of this whole period that we call waxing. It's not a separate period like the brothers at True Nation or the brothers at HODC or Hoshua Amariel or any other brother or even Judaism. And that's what's ironic about it. I sat and listened to Mathaswa talk about the fake Jews for 2 years. And then lo and behold, they end up following the same calendar, the same crescent moon doctrine as the so-called white man who calls himself a Jew. Because that's what he follows. He follows the crescent moon. Not saying that following the crescent moon automatically makes him wrong. It's just very spiritually suspect that you end up doing the same thing that your arch enemy is doing it and coming against your brother and your teacher and your elders that weren't doing it the way that our religious arch enemy, doctrinal arch enemy, I should say. All right. So the shining that's referred to in Ecclesiastes 43 and 8, what I'm doing here is I'm taking the verses, Ecclesiastes chapter 43, verse 7 and 8, and I'm walking you through the process of what these verses are saying so you can visualize it and see it and plug it into the equation for the new moon, the waning and the waxing. The waning is on the left side. It gets smaller. It's a black moon. And then on the right side of the moon, we have a waxing, which means that it starts to get bigger again. The new moon starts, the moon starts to become lit again. All right. So the increasing and the shining, is least at the waxing crescent, but they are both, all right. The new moon and the waxing crescent are both part of the increasing in her changing. It's part of one process called waxing, increasing, it says in the scripture, which is the same word as same concept as waxing. Okay. That's why we look at Ecclesiastes chapter 39, verse 12. It says, yet have I more to say, which I have thought upon, for I am filled as the moon at the full. Which means that, being filled at the moon at the full is full of what? Full of light. The increase is at its maximum. So if we see that this is the middle of a phase, how can we say, oh, this is the new year, this is the new month? Or the crescent, how can we say this is the new phase? Because it's part of a whole separate phase of increasing. All right. And the importance is that If you don't get this right, you end up polluting all of the holy days. And then Wisdom of Solomon chapter 1, verse 4 and 5. The Holy Spirit will not enter into you. You won't have wisdom. That means everything that you're getting now is a result of you and your own imagination or your own knowledge, your own abilities. Nothing spiritual or God sent about the conclusion you're reaching. It ain't coming from the Most High. Period. All right. So now the moon is a servant of Yahweh, and the moon has specific jobs to do at specific times. These jobs are done at appointed times, and we did a big lesson. Remember last night we stayed on Moedim or Mawa'idya for about an hour and a half talking about that. So I know you all don't need a refresher on that. We talked about the water, we talked about the peg, and we talked about the eye, and we talked about the movement through the sky, and we talked about the waters on the first day, the spirit hovering above the waters, and the waters being divided. And we talked about Shemayim, and the prefix is the word for heavens is nothing but a prefix in front of water. So we talked about all of those things. All right. So now we know that we know that this is a concept that is not, is not weird or strange. All right. So the moon has a job to do at specific appointed times. And then we even discussed how the Sabbath is a Moedim in its own right, according to the initial instruments of the Moedim that we see in Genesis chapter 1. We talked about those initial instruments of the Moedim, and then we talked about the 4 other instruments of Moedim that Yahweh gave us on the 4th day, and how they were incorporated into the 2 primary instruments of Moedim that Yahweh gave us on the 1st day. All right. So now these jobs that the moon has are done at specific points of time, which tell us how and when we begin our month. Now the moon, she's also there for our observation and calculation to determine and to declare the times of our annual holy days given by Yahweh. And we talked about that last night too, from Leviticus chapter 23, verse 1, 2, and 3. And we discussed all of the Hebrew words, and we saw how the words were used in other places. All right. So, so the moon is used for the calculation of the times of the days of the month, not the week, the month, and then for the year. Okay. Declares when we keep these certain days. So each new phase of the new moon is a testament and evidence to the power of Yahweh to forever command even the celestial creations, because the moon does her job. And this is very important that you understand that the moon is assigned to do her job forever. Why is this very important? Because the book of Jubilee says that the moon is going to stop doing her job. So we got to go to the sun and use the sun now. So that's talking against the Bible, because the scripture says that if these ordinances ever stop doing their job, Israel no longer has a covenant with me. That's in Jeremiah chapter 31. So in essence, what these people use in the book of Jubilee, like GOCC, what they're saying is that the Most High has no more covenant with Israel because the moon stopped doing her job, which is a lie. And that's what I'm telling you, like, these doctrines are not consistent when you analyze all of the other things that need to be in effect. We're not changing nothing. We're saying this is what the Most High said, this is what we got to do, and that's that. Okay? And that's that. And we can't change it. All right, so now let's move on. So the moon, the moon is elevated high as a sign in the world for the world to see. So she performs her duty with or without our observation. So it's a new moon, whether you see it or not. You don't got to wait to see a crescent. The event of the new moon is happening in the sky. And this is all building upon Sirach or Ecclesiasticus 43 and 8. That's what this whole understanding is coming from. It's just breaking it down into finer details. So now, when we move into Sirach, Ecclesiastes chapter 43, verse 6, it tells us, he, Yahweh, he made the moon also to serve in her season, all right, for a declaration of time and a sign of the world. All right, so the moon is there as a declaration of time and as a sign of the world. What does that mean? All right. He has a job to do, whether we see it or not. It's a token up there in the sky. And if she does her job, it doesn't matter if we see it or not. For example, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's there, does it make a sound? Yes, it makes a sound. So if you don't see the new moon, is it still the new moon? Yes, it's still the new moon. You just late. You're just late. We as the watchmen of Israel upon the mountains of Mount Arad and the Negev desert, which is really Jerusalem, we've spotted the new moon. So now all of you other people can observe the new moon as an observation today. Well, what of us that are already polluting this day? Oh, it makes no matter. Just wait until the sun goes down and begin the first day of the month. Come on, man. So our ancestors had the ability to calculate the movement of the stars, the sun, and the moon to determine when the new moon was going to occur. All right. Much like the sunshine, the Sabbath, or a tree that falls in the woods. The event of the new moon is a natural occurrence which occurs according to the will of Yahweh, whether you see it or know it or not. In other words, right now, is the sun shining right now? You may say, no, it's dark outside, but the sun is still shining, just not where you are. Sun never stops shining. Sun never stops shining. If I wait and say, okay, if I say, okay, the sun is shining here, y'all, we can start a new day, the sun is shining. Somebody in California be like, man, your day started, but I ain't starting no day 3 o'clock. I ain't starting no day 3:30 in the morning. Your day started on the East Coast at 6 o'clock or 6:30, but my Seattle, my California day, no, sir. My day did not start yet. Or somebody in Dominican Republic, oh man, it's 6:30. The day started. Ring the alarm, everybody. The day started. Ring the alarm, the day started, right? Well, okay, it's 6 o'clock in Dominican Republic. It's 2 a.m. in California. All right. California will not be a part of your religious organization if you are building your days of worship, your new moon, and your time to pray based on Dominican Republic time. No. Even based on Jerusalem time, no. And that's what kills me. See, everybody got common sense when it comes to the Sabbath. I don't see nobody in America talking about, oh, it's a Sabbath in Jerusalem. Let's start the new day. Let's start the new day for the Sabbath now. I don't see nobody in America saying, well, you know, it's dark in Jerusalem, honey, so we really should refrain from intimacies, baby, because it's, you know, even though it's 12 o'clock in New York, but it's 8 p.m. in Jerusalem, honey, so we can't lay together, you know, until you know, the Sabbath is over in Jerusalem, which is going to be 8 p.m. tomorrow night. Then it's going to be 12 noon in New York. See, nobody does that. And that's what I'm saying. These doctrines are not consistent across the line. How come it's just the new moon that got to go by Jerusalem? Because you're waiting for a physical pagan observation to be announced to look at a crescent moon and say, now we can party. But you're still waiting why you're not doing that for the Sabbath? Why you not doing that? Oh, Passover started in Jerusalem, so we need to start it at the same time exactly right now. Why you not doing that for the Passover? How come you've made the moon such an idol that, oh, somebody gotta see it? Do somebody gotta see darkness in Jerusalem too for me to keep the Sabbath where I am in the world? You see, that doctrine doesn't make sense. Everything we're doing is consistent all across the board. Everything is happening according to the time and the influence and the impact of the sun where you are in the world, darkness where you are in the world, not where I am. Regardless if I see it or not, you go by where you are. Okay? So our ancestors could tell you when the new moon is going to be. Yahweh put the moon on her course, and we're witnesses to the work of Yahweh. Okay? But the new moon enters into a new phase with predictability, even if no other human being observed. I mean, imagine the audacity. Can you imagine the audacity? Man, I don't know if I should start the Sabbath. Not me and you in the same city. I don't know if I should start the Sabbath. Not, hey, Parzal, you start the Sabbath? Nah, I ain't started yet. Well, I'm not starting yet either until Parzal started. I ain't started. So you basing your salvation on if I started the Sabbath, you know the rules and regulations. You don't got to ask me. Oh, it's nighttime now. It's the dark evening now. So I'm gonna start the Sabbath now. But it could be the evening when it's a little bit of light. Okay, well, you started when it's a little bit of light and ended when it's completely dark. That way you cover all your bases. But the new moon is still happening with or without any human observation. The Most High Yahweh doesn't need for you to observe it in order for it to be existing, because it's done with a programmable predictability. That means you can program what you're going to be doing based upon the movement. Our ancestors did the same thing. And we have scientific resources, that allow us to make the same type of important decisions, important scheduling. Okay. So when the sun rises, all right, it's a sunrise if we see it or not. If the stars are in the sky at night, right, the twinkle of the stars are there, even if we don't see them, because the clouds are blocking them. Even if they're not there, even if we don't see them, the twinkle is still there. All right, it's still happening. So now, when the moon enters into her new phase, it begins a new month, period, whether you see it or not. But the predictability by which it happens can be and marked by you on your calendar, which is exactly what we did. And we say, hey, for you, this one you start to observe it. But for you observe it, by this time frame over here, because we in two different time zones, and we're not going to have the same celestial event happening. Okay. So now we know when the event of the new moon is going to happen. We know when it will occur, and this occurrence is independent of any human being's validation or any human being's confirmation. Who in the hell do these Negroes think they are to have people observing the month of Abib because they saw or didn't see the month? Are you God? Well, the brothers in Jerusalem, they didn't see the new moon yet, so we can't. I don't give a damn what them Negroes in Jerusalem have seen or not seen. We know when it's going to happen. And this is exactly what Solomon says, but they don't understand what Solomon meant when he said it. Let me read it real quick. These people don't understand wisdom. All right. And I know we're doing pretty good time-wise. When you go into what Solomon said. And this is what the scripture means when it says the Most High will hide something, but it's up to you as a kingly figure to seek it out. And a lot of these brothers haven't sought out nothing. What they sought out was some YouTube videos. That's what they sought. They sought a man figure to look to give them unvalidated information. How do you know this person really saw the new moon? Ain't lying. How do you know it's a cloudy sky out there and they talking to somebody with glaucoma because they didn't see it because they was, they didn't see it. They're talking to somebody with glaucoma about it. Cataracts. Oh yeah, I saw it. It was up in the sky. Oh yeah, I saw it. Even when you're reading the Talmud, it tells you that. I read this story someplace else. I didn't read it. I don't use the Talmud as an educational source. But it was a story. I was reading something that said that people had a disagreement. No, it was. I didn't read it. It was a so-called rabbi talking about this on the program. No, it was. I think it was Nehemiah Gordon, and he was saying there was one rabbi didn't believe that it was a new moon, and the other one believed it was, and the other one said he had witnesses, but the other one didn't believe the witnesses because he thought they lied because they was known liars, and the so-called rabbi believed them, but the other one didn't, and the other one pulled the other one to court. So how do you know these people ain't lying? These people don't got the highest levels of integrity. All right. Let me read this to you real quick. Okay. This is Wisdom of Solomon chapter 7, verse 17. And a lot of this actually happened to me. A lot of this actually happened to me when I was fasting and I was praying. That's why I press the issue so much, because these brothers haven't done no fasting or praying, no research, no biblical background from the Torah and Psalms to prove their doctrine. All right. It says, Wisdom of Solomon 7:17, for he gave me truthful knowledge of the things that are, to see the structure of the world and the operation of the elements, the beginning and ending and middle of times, the changing of cycles and the changes of the seasons, Moedim, the cycles of the years and the positions of stars. So these people are making the calendar. Can they say that, yes, these descriptions that Solomon is giving you, I'm aware and I had the knowledge of these things. I didn't before, but I asked for it. And over time, I started to see it. And this is what it's talking about. No, they can't do that. But this is what a king or a ruler or a leader that we're looking to for wisdom, for Torah, should be able to give us. They should be able to give us these things. What is the cycles of the year? I thought the year was a year. That's it. What is the cycles talking about? And what determines those cycles? Whether you're talking about a metatonic cycle, or which is, well, we're not going to get into it. Ask them. Metatonic cycle, or whether you're talking about how do you have 13 or 12 months? What is your determining factor? What is your bottom line determining factor on whether or not we're going to have 12 or 13 months? Ask anybody that. Ask them that. See what answer you get. Because we know, but do they know? We know, but do they know? The answer 9 times out of 10 is no. They don't know. They ain't got no idea. All right. So now, he made the moon to serve in her season for a declaration of time and a sign of the world. And the explanation that I gave after that, it shows clearly by the scripture that the new moon is a period of time between the decreasing crescent and the increasing crescent. Okay. Between the increasing crescent and between the decreasing crescent. And it is in that period of time when the moon is black and in front of the sun. This is the biblical definition and description of the new moon. Light is decreased, light is decreased, and it hasn't increased yet. Okay. Now, when we talk about the constellation, which is the Mazzaroth, all right, there's nothing biblical as to the ancient names of the 12 groups of stars known as the zodiac, but they have been known by the following names in English and in Hebrew. So going to these 12 names based on the shape that they make in the sky. All right. The shape that they make in the sky. You got you have a ram, you have a bull, you have two people, you have a crab, you have a lion, you have a woman, you have a Libra or scales, all right. You have a scorpion, and you have somebody with a bow, you have a goat, another goat, all right, and you have somebody with buckets of water, and you have a fish. So now the sun and moon, they travel past all of these 12 groups of stars, okay, on a regular course, all right, as if they're traveling on a path that they keep going around this path. They always go on this path. They don't go outside the path, and they always travel at a predictable rate of speed. Okay, so the Mazzaroth, when you go into the Most High asks Job a question in Job chapter 38, verse 32. He says, "Can you bring forth Mazzaroth in his season, or can you guide Arcturus with his sons?" All right. So Mazzaroth refers to the constellations. Okay. And the verse also indicates that they operate and interact with the other celestial bodies certain ways at certain times. Otherwise, how would you be saying, okay, when is this constellation going to be doing this from my vantage point of the earth, which shows that we don't always see everything the same way from the same angle every year. But these brothers totally overlook Genesis 1:14, and they think that Genesis 1:14 is actually Genesis 1:16. They don't see that it's a totally different group of lights. Okay, so through this circuit path of the constellations, even though they're not mentioned by specific names, but they're mentioned as a group. Now, what that shows us is that that group needs to be taken into consideration when calculating the measurements and the movements and the importance of where it is, because it's all interactive with other constellations. It's not just something that's happening on its own, right? It's not just something that it's doing, and when it does it, it has no impact on nothing else. It's all impacted, and it's all related. All right. So I mean, we have records in the Bible. Okay, we have actual records in the Bible, in our records, that talk about this group. We call them constellations. Con meaning together or with, and stellations come from stella or stellar, which means stars. So stars that are together. All right, and we know that they making a kind of like a circle shape. We know that. All right. So Solomon, he is the one, the same Solomon we read about in Wisdom of Solomon chapter 7:17, to talk about the stars and the constellations and the movement through the sky. He called these things the Mazzaroth. He called them the circle of stars. All right. In Wisdom of Solomon chapter 13, verse 2, he says a circle of stars. But what's curious is that he says circle of stars, and then he says the lights of heaven. The same division we see in the book of Genesis chapter 1. We see the lights in the firmament in verse 14, and then we see the sun, moon, and stars in verse 16. So we see the same two-part division of these lights in the sky. So in that passage, Wisdom of Solomon 13:2, we read about the circle of stars that's being mentioned, but the other lights are called the lights of heaven. All right. And that's the same exact pattern that we see in Genesis chapter 1, verse 14. Genesis 1:14 says, in the same order, it says, and Elohim said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven. All right. To divide the night All right, to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. So these particular lights are for signs, season, days, and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. Now, when we go into verse 16, it says, and Elohim made. Now, first of all, let's reiterate the fact that it says, let there be lights, and it was so. That means it's complete. Whatever he said is complete now. It was so. All right. So that's done. That's a done deal. And then when we go in verse 16, it says, and additionally, and Elohim made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the less light to rule the night. He made the stars also. So the circle of stars in Wisdom of Solomon chapter 13 and 2, and the lights in the firmament of heaven in Genesis 1:14, they refer to the same group of lights called constellations. They are for signs, seasons, days, and years. As signs, athath, all right, athath, they show and they indicate and they point to specific things that must occur now before they actually occur. It's a sign. You don't pass the sign, and this is what these guys are doing. You don't pass the sign and say, exit 25 right here, and then try to get off at the exit. There's a sign before the exit. Kind of get into what Rapaya Allah said about the signs and the significance and the spirituality of it. Well, if you not recognizing these signs of heaven, what qualify the signs? It didn't say the sign. And this is the thing: if these things are signs, how come everybody just looking at one sign, which is the moon? Nobody's looking at the constellations and the moon. It's a plural word. If these lights are for signs, how come these people are only fixated on one single solitary light whose cycle and shape just so happen to be worshipped by every ancient pagan, Gentile, heathenistic nation in the ancient world that we come from? It was just a coincidence, right? As my cousin used to say, it's a cosmic coincidence. All right. So that's how they operate as signs. Now, as seasons, sign seasons, as Mawa'adim or Moedim, they occur regularly to indicate to us that the feast days are occurring in their proper time. All right. And they're occurring in their proper time. The feasts are also called Moedim. We talked about that last night. And we see that these are feast days when we look at Moedim, when we look at Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 through 2, when it talks about the Sabbath. And then when we go into Leviticus chapter 23, verse 1 and 2, it says, Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, speaking to the children of Israel, and saying to them concerning the feast of Yahweh, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations, even these are my feasts. So right here, the word for feast is the same word as Mawa'adim or Moedim, all right, which is Mawa'adia. These two words are two different plural forms of the word Mawa'id, which means a season or an event happening at a specific time. All right. So therefore, Mawa'idya and Mawa'idiyam are the same word in Hebrew, translated into two different Hebrew words. One of them was feast, and the other one was seasons. But in the Hebrew, it's the exact same word. But because the Gentiles and the so-called the Israelite Judaism followers, the original ones, they didn't want you to have the proper understanding. They confused the language of the Bible in English, and sometimes even in the Hebrew, so that you will have two different thoughts for the same word. And this is, see, and we talked about this last night. If I say to you homosexuality, ew. If I say to you a man laying with a bear or a man laying with a possum, you'll say, ew. If I say to you working on a Sabbath, you'll say, shouldn't do that. You don't say ew. But in Yahweh's, it's the same penalty. But that's because you've been programmed to say these things are tolerable and these things are not tolerable. But in Yahweh's eyes, none of it is tolerable. Homosexuality is just as bad as breaking the Sabbath under the law. Under the law. Okay? Under the law. So now, Yahweh has given us the same meaning and the same sense of these words that we see in English as feast and seasons. Okay? But the constellations as a large, non-moving mawa'idya, which means it's like a fixed, appointed time and seasons, they allow us to know when the mawa'idya of Yahweh are going to be coming. That's why we're looking at the constellations, not just at the crescent moon. We know that I think the 23rd, was it? That the sun went into the first constellation on the 23rd. I think it was the 23rd. Was it the 23rd, y'all? I don't have the calendar in front of me. I think it was the 23rd, wasn't it?
20.
The 20th. Okay, so the sun went to the first constellation, and the 20, the sun is like the man. It sets the pace. And then on the 27th, 28th, 29th, 27th, 28th, 29th, the moon came into the constellation. And then on the 29th, she got in front of the sun. And we got a new month starting. All right. So the lights in the firmament of heaven, the circle of stars, those are also for days. They divide the days from the night. The days of the month are counted according to the amount of time it takes for the moon to pass through all these constellations and back in front of the sun. That's how they're for days. They're for the days of the month, because once the moon passes through all of these 12 constellations and passes through the one where it started and goes to the next one, that's when we go, with the sun already being there, perfect clockwork, that's when we go into day one. So it goes sign, season, days. That's how the days of the month, not the days necessarily of the week. Why? Because the days of the week were seen independent. But now Yahweh said these lights are going to divide the day from the night. But the division was already taking place before the constellations were created. Okay. So now a new month begins on the Hebrew day that the moon passes in front of the sun. And the moon usually takes between 29 to 30 Hebrew days to pass through all of the constellations until it goes into its new phase. All right. And finally, and this is kind of like one of my favorite parts. Finally, let me take another sip. Excuse me. Finally, the constellations are for years. The moon must pass through all 12 constellations for a new year to begin. So it's the movement of the moon through the constellations which begin a new year, not just because you counted to 12. It had to pass through all 12 constellations. And that determines when the new year is going to start. We're not just looking at the movement of the moon exclusively. The moon appears in the constellation of the Lamb/Ram, which begins the new year, the new Shana. Because as you know, if you've been following the knowledge I've been sharing with you, you know that the word year actually means second movement. The word year means two. The root word of the word year means two. So it's passed through everything twice. It's in the first one, blah, 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 blah. Then it goes through that first one a second time. And then once it goes to that where it started at a second time, now we start a whole new cycle. Again, like perfect clockwork. And I challenge any brother that tells us we're supposed to follow a crescent moon to explain these scriptures. They won't be able to, because demons don't give you good explanations. Because once you have a good explanation, the lie can no longer stand. But I give you full transparency. I give you full truth. I give you the Hebrew references so that you can stand on the truth yourself with or without me. And not be out there looking like a nut, like a fool, talking about, oh, well, you got to ask Parazal, man. I just know it's complicated. I can't explain it good. Well, if you can't explain it, you shouldn't be doing it. Period. Because of what I'm saying to you is basic English, and I've explained it in English, and I've explained it in Spanish too. Okay? It's and Daniel is the conduit for any shortcomings that are there for my Spanish deficiencies. Okay, so it tells you that the movement of the moon through the constellations begins the new year, and the new year starts in the month of the Ram or the month of the Lamb, which begins the new Shana. That's why I say Rosh Hashanah. All right. This is also indicated in the paragraph 4 of chapter 10 of Josephus and his Antiquities. And I quote, in the month Xanthicus, which is called by us Nisan, and is the beginning of our year. When the sun, can somebody go on mute? Because there's a lot of background and feedback. It says when the everybody's muted already. Are you let me see, is this muted over here? Whoops.
Oh, yeah, where is Dobby?
I think that's are you muted, Masha?
No, I just unmuted.
Okay. Was your baby just talking like 10 seconds ago?
No, I think that was Jay.
Okay.
My apologies. I thought I was on mute. I'm sorry.
Oh, we're not tripping, man. No, we're not tripping. It's just it was kind of jarbled, you know what I'm saying? But
he's learning right now.
Okay, good. The brother said he repeating what he hearing. Reply to Allah. So now, you know, as we get to the conclusion, y'all, Josephus says that in the month Xanthicus, which is called by us Nisan, and is the beginning of the year, when the sun arises in Aries. And what he means by that is that the sun goes into that constellation and then the moon follows it. And that's when we have a new year. This constellation, okay, is the first of the 3 constellations for the springtime. All right. The first month in which Passover occurs is the first month of the year. All right. So it is the true Rosh Hashanah. All right. It's also called Abib. This first month is also the time of Pesach, which is our first feast of the year. And the Passover, we're obligated to eat a young sheep. So do you see that? The new year is beginning when this moon cycle begins in that constellation of a sheep. And then the Most High tells us to kill a sheep in that time frame. The sky forever is marking the season that is upon us. because now you got to eat this sheep, and you're in the constellation in that lunar cycle of the sheep. So it's quite befitting. So now remember that, recall that in Wisdom of Solomon chapter 13 and 2, when he talked about the circle of stars, and in Genesis chapter 1, verse 15 through 16, it mentions another group. It mentions another group that is called the it mentions another group of stars that's called the lights of heaven, and also two great lights and stars. So both are mentioned after the constellations are addressed. This is because the constellations, and I think me and you talked about this a few days ago, Daniela, the constellations are like the hours on a clock that do not move, and they are always in the same place at the same time. The sun is like the hour hand of a clock that moves around all 12 minutes very slowly. And the moon is like the minute hand of a clock, which passes through all of the numbers on a clock before it begins a new cycle, or before it begins a new hour. All right. So picture it like that. The constellation is like 1 through 12. The sun is the hour hand. And when it's at 1, this is the first month of the year. When it's at 2, that's the second month of the year. And then the moon, when it's lined up with 1, that's when we have the first month. Then the moon passes around again, and it goes through 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, pass through all the numbers again. And when it comes back around, it goes to the next number. When the minute, the second hand is the hour hand is in 2, and then the moon goes back, it's completed the 12, it went through all 12 cycles again. That's when we say, okay, now it's 2 o'clock. And that's how the whole cycle starts. So now you see that, you can't really, tell what time it is. In other words, take the numbers off. Take the numbers off and put the clock in a different position. It may be a little harder to tell, what time it is. But what keeps you consistent is that, it goes through 12. But in our system, it lines up in 1. Then the minute hand goes around again, and the hour hand moves to 2. And then the moon lines up with the 2 on the clock. And then it goes to 3. And then goes to 4. All right. Which is how it really should be done, because that's a very complex mechanical configuration. But that's what makes sense. And then to keep it static for you, so you don't got to count 60 minutes every time away from 2 and then 60 minutes away from 3. It's just 12. So it makes sense why they did it like that. But for the Most High, everything's moving through those constellations. The sun is not staying, at the 12th constellation and then it goes to the 12th one. Then the moon is in the 12th constellation. Oh, yeah, it's the 12th month. And then the sun goes through 1, the first constellation, and then the moon comes back around to the 12th constellation. Oh, we're in the second month now. No, it doesn't happen like that. It has to be lined up with the moon. So the movement of the sun and the moon through the constellations will forever be as they were appointed to be by Yahweh, without any failure. All right. So now, 12 months or 13 months in a year. Let's go into this real quick. As we see, the 12 constellations are related to the 12 new moon movements and to the new moon calculation. The U.S. Naval Observatory and professional ephemerides are 2 of the most reliable and readily available resources for knowing the dates of the new moon. The Ephemeris is a book which gives you the daily positions of the sun, moon, and stars, etc., in relation to the 12 constellations. All right. Both sources are agreeable and consistent with each other and with other sources. It takes a complete lunar cycle. In a complete lunar cycle, rather, the moon passes through each of the 12 constellations one time. This makes 12 Kadashim, or 12 months, 12 new moons. Sometimes the moon passes through one constellation 2 times. So if it passes through one constellation 2 times, that means that we're going to have 13 months. And usually, when this happens, we'll usually have a longer winter and unseasonably, we have like a colder early spring. Right now, that's what happened in the year when I was born. On the year when I was born, it was March 25th, which is generally kind of warm sometimes. But on this particular time frame in this year, 1973, what happened? What happened was we had Adar 2, and it was snow, it was ice, and it was very cold outside going into March, which is after the spring equinox. So the equinox doesn't determine the season. The equinox is just about the earth. What determines the season is the position and the movement of the sun through the constellations and the moon through the constellations. All right. So it goes through one constellation twice, which means we have 13 months. So the lunar cycle of the year does not always end with 12 months. And this is where GMS get it wrong. They having Passovers in February. All right. It doesn't always end with 12 months, but the lunar cycle ends when the moon has passed through all 12 constellations, not just 12 months, but goes through all 12 constellations, which is the statute that the Most High gave us in Genesis chapter 1, verse 14. He says, this is what you use to determine your years, not just where the moon is moving. So we're following the way to do it exactly as Yahweh told us in Genesis chapter 1, verse 14. These are for signs, seasons, days, and years. But people are using the moon alone for the year. And they're not using the constellations from Genesis chapter 1, verse 14. But when you look at it, it's always consistent. All right. So if the moon passes through one constellation twice, this creates a year of 13 months, or rather 12 distinct lunar phases. All right. And this is what happened. Now this is ironic, right? This is seen if we look at the year 2014, when we will have 13 months. So when I put this paper together, it's like 11 years ago. During this time, HODC was keeping the black moon. 2014. This is the year I'm referring to, is the year we had the first constellation. I mean, the first Hebrew Israelite Summit. So they've not come up with any scientific papers to dispute this paper right here. They came up with a biblical lesson based on the book of Enoch to contradict this paper right here, but they couldn't use the Bible to do it. All right. But I had no idea when I wrote this paper that they were going to switch their doctrine. All right. So now the conventional label of Adar 2 was attached to this 12th lunar cycle by Hillel II in the 4th century. But there's no biblical name for this month. Okay, there's no biblical name. So it's not the number of new moons. So it is not the number of new moons, 12 or 13, that define a year. But it's the number of cycles that the moon makes before it arrives back to the first constellation or the constellation where it began the cycle. Right before year itself, the first constellation and the amount of lunations, the amount of new moons we have, or where it passes through, and arriving back at the first constellation, that's what determines the new year, not whether it's 12. You can't just say 12, 12, 12, 12, 12, 12, and you can't say randomly 12, 12, 13, 12, 12, 13, 12, 12, 13, 12, 12, 12, 13. You have to look at what Yahweh gave us in Genesis chapter 1, verse 14, the lights of the firmament. All right. So now, and again, I want to reiterate the fact that in this paper, I'm making reference to 2014, and I have the calendar written down from 2013 going in. So I had to be in 2013 when I put this thing together, man. So this thing is 12 years old. And I ain't even trying to be funny, but these people had 12 years to catch up with this basic level of biblical scholarship. Basic. And they ain't done it yet.
Saquon. Basic?
Yeah, I mean, this is these geeks. When I say basic biblical scholarship, it's just this is just explaining the verses. That's why I call it basic.
Okay.
It's just explaining verses. It's not nothing controversial or, Now it's just my words that may not seem basic, but the biblical. Okay, put it like this. In 12 years, they haven't taken these scriptures from the Bible and given a better explanation for them. Is that better? That's more of a true statement.
Yeah, kind of 12 years to catch up. Yeah.
12 years. And look, this I don't even got to put nothing new to this. I only got to put nothing new to this. We got to put nothing new to it. Okay. This is put together in like 2013, man. These guys had 12 years to catch up with this Rapayala. What's the hold up? All right. So now, and again, this is what has allowed us to move forward in wisdom, is by completing these cycles of understanding, applying them, and then you know what? Once we get offline, we want to have a conversation about some stuff. So don't go nowhere. We're gonna sign off of the other recorded social medias, and then I want to have a conversation. Somebody can record it so we can have a record of it. All right. So I'm gonna wrap this up. So now, it's not the number of the new moons, 12 or 13, that defines the year, but it's the number of cycles that the moon makes before it arrives back to the first constellation. That's what defines the year. That's why the new year is called Shana. It's called 2. The second what? See, ask him, what is it the second? Why is it called 2? And if it's called 2, how are you beginning the new year in the 12th constellation and it hasn't gone back to the first constellation? How are you beginning the new year? How are you in, the 11th constellation and you're starting a new year? Why you not even a new year? You're starting a second cycle. How can you start a second cycle before the new cycle is up? That's like you work 40 hours a year. I mean, you work 40 hours this week so far, and it's only Thursday, and then your boss say, "Well, let's go back to 30 hours." Why? So I ain't got to pay you no overtime. You ain't going for that. You ain't going for that. So how you gonna let these cats pull a wool over your eyes and be like, "Well, you know what? We didn't finish the previous cycle because we don't know about the constellation and all of that, but we counted to 12, so let's count from 1 again." Okay. So now, as we conclude, Sirach chapter 33, verse 14. Good is set against evil, and life against death. So is the godly against the sinner, and the sinner against the godly. So look upon the works of the Most High, and there are 2 and 2, one against another. 2 Ezra 6:45. Upon the 4th day thou commandest that the sun should shine, and the moon should give her light, and the stars should be in order. All right. Verse 46. And gavest them a charge to do service unto man that was to be made. Do service unto man that was to be made. So everything is created with opposites and in opposites, one against another. Polarities are part of creation. Darkness and light, male and female, water and fire, good and evil. The moon was created with some light coming off of it, giving light. The exact opposite of this is not a dim state. The exact opposite of a bright state is a dark state. So remember, 2nd Ezra says when the moon was created, the moon was given light. On the 4th day, you commanded that and if I want to be honest, it doesn't say it was created in light. It says upon the 4th day, you commanded that the sun should shine and the moon give her light. It says he commanded on the 4th day that these things bring forth light. If you want to be technical, and the stars should be in order. So the moon was created, according, if we want to interpret it that way, was it created with light, or is it expressed that it was created to give light, which is giving her light? That's the normal condition of the moon. The moon's normal condition is to give light. That's what we mostly see about the moon. We see a crescent, half moon, full moon, waning moon. Then we see a half moon. Then we see a waning crescent, and then we don't see the moon again. So that state of the moon giving light shows you that at some point the opposite should be significant, which means not giving light, according to the principles that we just read, 2 and 2, one against another. Nothing complex. This is basic, Daniela. I think this is what happens. The precision, consistency, and the easiness of which you can apply this principle is what makes it is what gives its amazing, awesome, and complex appearance. It's almost like you create this simple tool that can do everything, but it's like the screwdriver that Doctor Who uses. This thing can do everything, but it's a basic device, but it can do everything. Oh, okay, the pipe is fixed. Okay, the wires are fixed. Okay, the wing is fixed. It fixes everything, and that's what it is, because I'm taking these basic concepts and I'm explaining them in relationship to the new moon. It can seem complicated or complex, but the basic principles are there. Polarity, opposites, either agreeing together or going against each other. The doctrine has to fulfill that position. Your pieces of that puzzle have to be opposites, polarities, or working together to be one. It's hot or cold, not it's this and that. Most High say I'm going to spit that out. All right. So when the moon's at its fullest, the 10th day, the Most High say, okay, get this animal. Get it on the 10th day while the moon is becoming full. Once you got that 14th day, moon is bright. The 14th day, 15th day, okay, go ahead and kill it now. 21st day, all right, y'all, chill out. It's over now. 21st day is over. Chill out. Same thing with atonement. All right, y'all, 10th day, we kind of between cycles right now. Go ahead and repent. And then 5 days later, oh yeah, Feast of Tabernacles, I can go to the holy convocation that I should not be going to if I'm not trying to be holy. So you got that time period in between where you getting it right. You bring it home, oh, little lamb. You don't kill it yet, though. You kill it on the 14th day between the evenings. Bayan ha'irabium. All right. So then it says that the female, male, evil, good, exact opposite. It wasn't created in a dim state. So the opposite of the dark moon should be a moon with light. All right. If you imagine your mother told you, I want every light in this house off, and I want you to go to bed. And you go into your room, minding your business with your little comic book, and you got a little pen light this big. Is your mother gonna look at the room and be like, oh, okay, he's only being a little disobedient to me. It's okay, don't worry. Or she's gonna be like, oh, your mother gonna say, oh, you think I'm playing games with you? Didn't I tell you every light in this house off in the bed? So how are you in the bed with a light? If I told you to turn off every light and go to bed, how are you sitting here in my bed, in my house, behind my door, under my blanket with a light? So how is the Most High going to have something, the bright light, and then evening and morning defining when time begins, and then you got a little bit of light, the whole new phase beginning, Sabbath. Now, mind you, darkness is the first day, second, third, fourth, fifth day, sixth day. Darkness is the Sabbath day, which means darkness now is the beginning of a week. And which means, oh, it's a new year, a bib. When's that happening? Oh, in the darkness. And now you say, well, but for the month, it's not dark. It's a little bit of light outside. Just a little teeny bit of light. Teensy weensy spider. A little bit of light in the sky. Because Most High, he's not consistent with time. See, the month is special, and the Most High give us, he wants us looking at that crescent moon that the Babylonians, the Akkadians, that the Sumerians, that the Hindus, that the Greeks, that the Romans use, that the Egyptians use in their idolatry worship. That's what Yahweh wants us to use, inconsistent with every other measurement of time. He wants us to use the crescent moon now, really. That's what we really believe in. Okay, so now, so this is the opposite of the bright moon, which is a new moon. The new moon and the dark moon, same thing. Not the moon that is in dark and light simultaneously with a little slither and a quarter, or it can't be that. So there are those brothers, those people that teach a doctrine about the moon becoming weak, and thus they teach that Enoch and Jubilee, that since the moon is weak, that we are to use the sun to determine our holy days and our feast days. This false doctrine is a contradiction. It's contradicted in the holy writings. It contradicts what Jeremiah said. All right, it contradicted what the Most High told us in Ecclesiastes through wisdom. So right now, let's focus on the Book of Jubilee. The Book of Jubilee, all right, what it does,
You want to cheat?
it tells a
What is that?
the Book of Jubilee tells a blatant lie. All right. The book of Jubilee tells a blatant lie against the Bible. Listen what it says. Book of Jubilee, chapter 36, verse 36 to 37. This is what it says. It says, and walk according to the feast of the Gentiles after their error and after their ignorance. For there will be those who will assuredly make observations of the moon, how it disturbs the seasons and comes in from year to year, 10 days too soon. These words are in direct contradiction of Yahweh, who said that the moon will always perform as it was created by Yahweh and will always be for feasts and times. Baruch chapter 6, verse 60. For sun, moon, and star, being bright and sent to do their offices, are obedient. Jeremiah 31:35. Thus saith Yahweh, who gives the sun for a light by day, and the ordinances of the moon and of the stars for a light by night. All right, verse 36. It says, if these ordinances shall depart from before me, which means they stop doing their job, they move away from what Yahweh has them doing. Thus saith Yahweh, the seed of Israel also shall cease from being a nation before me forever. So the ordinances or the enactment or the order of the moon and the sun, these things are set forever and will never be changed, even though the book of the book of Jubilee tells a lie and says that they're going to change. The moon has been appointed for feast by Yahweh, and the Mawa'adim, the seasons of Yahweh. When the moon is at its appointed place, we begin a new month. We expect the coming event at a certain time frame on a certain day. This is the Mawa'adim. Okay. So it says, Sirach 43 again. It says, he made the moon to serve in her season for a declaration of times and a sign of the world. From the moon is a sign of feast, a light that decreases in her perfection. All right. So, which means that we already gave all of the information and the details about that particular about those particular verses and what they mean. We already said what they meant. All right. And Yahweh shows us what they mean, because the scriptures, they teach us what these words mean. All right. So now it tells us also in in Ecclesiastes chapter 43, it says, Yahweh made it, his commandment, at his commandment, it runneth hastily. That's talking about the sun. And the moon decreases in her perfection. That's talking about the waxing of the moon, the waning of the moon before it becomes a new moon. All right. And in verse 10 of Sirach chapter 43, the scripture says, at the commandment of the Holy One, they will stand in their order and will never faint in their watches. So how are people trying to use the book of Jubilee or the book of Enoch saying that the moon is not doing its job properly, when Yahweh said the moon is never going to stop doing its job properly? He said it in Jeremiah. All right. He said in Jeremiah chapter 31. It's written in Ecclesiasticus chapter 43. And we see it in Psalms chapter 104, verse 19, where it says, he appointed the moon for seasons. The sun knoweth his going down. That shows us that the moon and the constellations are working together to give us the proper season, not one or the other, but the backdrop of everything is the constellations. All right. So the commandment of Yahweh has been given to the sun, moon, and stars. They will always stand in their order. They will never fail at their jobs or fail at their watches. The moon will always be a sign of feast and a declaration of times. Therefore, we can determine with confidence that the reliable word of Yahweh is the truth, and that the book of Jubilee and the book of Enoch, those are contradictions of the Bible, and they are not proper for determining sound biblical doctrine. All right, we can't use them to try to make doctrine up. I mean, you want to read them, for your own knowledge or whatever, You got time to waste? Go ahead and read them. But when it comes to right and wrong, nah, you can't use that. All right. So now we have the calendar of Judaism and Karaism, being a Karaite or whatever. And I think, what I want to do with that, it's been about an hour and 55 minutes. And I'm not going to be able to read all of this. I can read it for about maybe 3 minutes. It says, the calendar for Judaism and Karaism. Hillel too used calculations to make a fixed calendar with each month assigned a certain number of days. Okay, hold up a minute. Hey, Jay, can you mute again, man? Been assigned a certain number of days. Okay. This calendar, however, is off by 1 or 2 days, and it often contradicts the modern calculation as well as the calculation of the ancient calendars of the Inca, the Maya, and the Aztecs. So the calendar that they're using is not lining up with the other ancient calendars. Blasphemous practice of postponement, which is endorsed by the Jewish calendar, but not by the Karaite calendar. All right, but both of them observe the crescent moon as the beginning of the month. In short, this is the practice of postponement. If the Day of Atonement falls on the first day of the week, all right, and of course the first day of the week is the day after the Shabbat. The practice of postponement says that the fast of the Day of Atonement can be postponed until the second day so you can cook after the Sabbath and then go into the fast. Why? It's got to be postponed because it's not reasonable to have 2 days in a row where we can't cook or we can't light a fire for food. So the holy day of the Day of Atonement is profaned in Judaism. It's profaned in Judaism with cooking and eating only because the cooking wasn't allowed on the previous day, which was the Sabbath. So that's wicked. Also, Judaism begins the new year at the beginning of the 7th month, even though the scriptures plainly say that the new year started in the month Abib. The holy writings that we use in the Holy Bible, they tell us to begin the new year in the month of Abib, all right, in Exodus chapter 12, verse 1, all right? So Yahweh spoke to Moses in the first month of Abib, and he said, when you come out of Egypt, keep this month as the first month of the year. So we keep the new year according to the words of the Torah, not according to any vain traditions of men. So we're in the first day, maybe the second day for some of us right now. All right. So the Karaite practice is to validate the new moon, just like the Jewish practice, validate the new moon only after citing it by 2 or 3 persons. But this is poor planning, and it loses the sanctity of the day. All right. So if it's let's say for example, if it's day or night with unclear skies, you will be allowed to profane the day of the new month of the year. Why? Just because 2 people didn't see it. 2 people didn't see it, and they didn't communicate with each other. So this also contradicts what King David said in 1 Samuel chapter 20, verse 5, when he says that after I will hide myself in the field until the 3rd day. And then King David said to Jonathan, he said, but Jonathan said to David, rather, tomorrow is the new moon, when he came back to him. So both Jonathan and King David, he wasn't the king at the time, though. Both of these had knowledge of the new moon. All right.
Yeah.
So if both of these had knowledge of the new moon before the new moon actually happened, the ancient Israelites, that shows you that the ancient Israelites also had what? Can somebody unmute that, the recent one? So the ancient Israelites had what? They had calendars that were based on calculations and based on the pattern of the moon. So obviously David and Jonathan had some kind of access to this information before people saw the event of the new moon, right? As well, David was confident as to the arrival of the new moon, even though he hadn't actually seen it and he didn't have no witnesses. So the Karaite doctrine of two witnesses observing the new moon is not shown in the Holy Bible. It's not shown in the Bible, all right? But the Holy Bible clearly shows that the ancient Israelites knew when the new moon was coming. And they made plans, as we see with David and Jonathan, according to that knowledge before it actually happened. So in modern times, we also know when a new moon is going to happen. So we can make plans to keep the new moon as a day of worship from our jobs. We don't do no buying and selling. We keep it in a manner that is consistent with the sanctity and the holiness of that day. It's a day of worship, as we see in Isaiah chapter 66, verse 23. And it shall come to pass from one new moon to another, from one Sabbath to another, all flesh is going to come before Yahweh to worship him. So from one new moon to another, we come to worship Yahweh. And that's why we say it's a day of worship, okay? And again, and I gave this example earlier, at the time of the Maccabees, the new moon was known before it was sighted and before it was seen. And time off of work was given as an option under the Greek occupation at the end of the oppression of Antiochus Epiphanes. The first day of the 7th month is a new moon, and it's also an annual feast day. Okay, it would qualify for that immunity from having to work. All right, we look at 1 Maccabees chapter 10, verse 34. It says this: furthermore, I will that all the feasts and Sabbaths and new moons and solemn days, and the 3 days before the feast, and the 3 days after the feast, which includes the memorial of the blowing of the trumpet, the feast day, first day of the 7th month. It says, he says that I will that 3 days after the feast shall be all of, he says, shall be all of immunity and freedom for all the Jews in my realm. So how are they planning 3 days before the feast day, which includes the new moon of the 7th month? How are they planning 3 days ahead of time if they're waiting to see it in the sky? So that's like 2 examples of them not waiting to see it, but planning. All right. So making matters worse, the new month of the 7th month may be postponed under certain circumstances in Judaism based on the Hillel calendar. This makes the holy days move further away from their natural celestial positioning. This is actually causing people to profane the holy day, and they try to sanctify a day that is common, a man-made day. So these days have been made holy by Yahweh, and we can't change them into ordinary days. This is in Sirach chapter 33, verse 9. Some of them, the days, he has made high days and hallowed them. And some of them he made ordinary days. So how is man going to say, well, this is a holy day, but we're going to make it ordinary? And then man is saying, well, this is an ordinary day, but we're going to make it a holy day. So you must not blindly follow Judaism or the Karaite calendars or these other guys telling you to follow the crescent moon or the white moon as the new moon. Both of these calendars was put into practice after Hamashiach by man-made religionists that was seeking to strengthen their own religion, or religion of men. But people of this nature often find pleasure in creating new doctrines that are outside the Holy Bible. Focus should have been put on refining and sanctification based on the evidence and the proof that's contained in our holy books. We are Israelites and we're trying to walk in the way of Hamashiach. All right. He will send wisdom, and Yahweh will send wisdom and Ruach HaKodesh to guide us to acceptable worship, which can be proven by the word of Yahweh. And the Gentiles are supposed to follow us. We're not supposed to be following them. So we are directly commanded not to learn the ways of the heathen regarding the signs of heaven. All right. So this is a reference to the movement of the sun, stars, and moon in the sky. And the Gentile nations, what they did, they used certain events in the heavens to justify their evil celebrations, their evil feasts, and their evil days of worship. So this is the origin of the false nativity that we see on December 25th, saying we're celebrating Christmas. Okay. So we see, so we see all of these days of worship that they're trying to give us as being originated in pagan practices. All right. So, that's gonna that's gonna kind of do it for us, right now. I need somebody to moderate the meeting. So when we look at the whole Bible, it's a consistent story. All right. So we can't be saying we're using the crescent moon. All right. And then we say we're going to delay it until the crescent moon is visible. The crescent moon is an ancient instrument that was used in worship of false gods. So if we use these instruments in our delayed observance of the new moon, we are literally learning the way of the heathen and observing their ways. And the Most High warned us in Jeremiah chapter 10, verse 1. All right. Learn not the ways of the heathen and be not dismayed at what? At the signs of heaven. So finally, all right, we close with the two passages, which again prove that we know the date of the new moon before it was cited by witnesses, and our recognition of the new moon was calculated, accurate, and it was known by the general population. We see in Ezekiel chapter 46 and 1, it says the gates of the temple are going to be open on the day of the new moon. The day begins at the previous sunset when the new moon happens. The same day that the new moon event happens in or occurs in. That day is going to be observed as a day of the new moon, and the gates of Jerusalem are going to be open. How are they going to open it on the day of the new moon if the crescent is the new moon and you're waiting to see it, and then that next day you're going to open the gates? That ain't what the scripture says. The scripture says the day of the new moon that the gates are going to be open. And then, so we must know when it's going to happen in order to make sure that the gates are open on that day. Once the sun comes up, when that day starts, the gates of the temple are going to be open for all flesh to come before Yahweh and worship him. All right. And finally, let's end with Judith chapter 8, verse 6. All right. Which says this, and she fasted all the days of her widowhood, except for the evenings of the Sabbath and the eves of the new moon and the new moon, and the feast and the solemn days of the house of Israel. So what do we have? If Judith knew the days of the evening of the new moon, and she knew the day of the new moon, she, like King David and like Jonathan, she knew the days of the new moon before they came. She did not base the new moon on the observation of two witnesses or on a crescent observation. She knew the time of the new moon, and she broke her fast during that period and on the evening before the new moon came in. This is what we see in the Bible. So if you want to go by the Bible, go ahead. But what's happening is that I'm telling you, GMS, IUIC, and True Nation, and the House of David out of New York City, they all leading people on a first-class ticket to the gates of hell, because they got all of their followers are polluting these holy days. All of them. They polluting the holy days. They polluting the new moon. And it's okay because there's false doctrine about we all got to be united in what? We discussed that last night. How am I going to unite with people that's following the ways of my enemies? They my brothers and I love them, but how am we going to be united with people that's doing exactly the opposite of what the Bible said? That's a hypocrite. That's a hypocrite. You know better than the Catholics saying we're going to get together with the Buddhists and we're going to get together with the Muslims and we're going to get together with the Hindus and we go all worship God together. Nah, you ain't worshiping God together because all y'all got different gods. So how was the House of David going to unite with somebody and go street teaching with the GMS followers or the Sakari followers when they got two different Sabbaths? This man done God knows what on your Sabbath and then going to come with you and say, we're going to worship on the Sabbath. We're going to go street teach on Saturday. But some of them ain't keeping the Sabbath as a holy day. All right. So this is a basic lesson / teaching, and I hope it helps you. I hope it helps you. I hope it helps you get a better understanding of the scriptures. And any questions? Hey, I'm available. I'm available. All right. So we're going to stay on the messenger call. But to all the brothers and sisters that are, on other social media platforms, may the Most High bless you. Listen to this, take notes, and you got questions, ask questions. And the people that's following these new moon doctrines about the crescent moon and the white moon and the lunar Sabbath, start from the Torah and explain it. Go into the writings of our kings and explain it. Don't start from. Notice that I ended with Ezekiel. I ended with Judith. We started in the Torah and with wisdom. Wisdom and the Torah and King David. Now, if you want to skip all of those and just start in the book of Ezekiel or the book of Matthew, feel free if that's how you rocking. But Hamashiach said that Moses is going to accuse us to the Father of right and wrong. Not Matthew, not King David, but Moses. He said it in John chapter 5, verse 45 through 47. So if you can't show in the books of Moses, the Torah, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, if you can't show in those books, then your doctrine probably is faulty. All right. So shalom to you, Facebook. Thanks for joining and sticking around. Right. And shalom to you. Shalom to you, YouTube. May the Most High bless and protect you. Shalom. It's in that.